I think that many significant changes start with a point of transformation, a moment when a light goes on. And for Milparinka, that switch flicked over about 7 years ago when we came across an interview that Deb Roget, who's here today, did, in which she spoke about the importance of knowing people, dreaming and thinking together to go about finding a life that makes sense. Deb went on to talk about the lives of some of the people who had disabilities who she knew, and they sounded absolutely great. They were full of choice, value, and included in their communities alongside peers who shared common interests rather than common disabilities. Now, after reading Deb's interview, I walked through our building with some of the people who I work with, talking to service users and wondering why weren't their lives as full of those of the people that Deb had spoken about. We asked ourselves one question at that time. We asked ourselves, what is getting in the way of the people we know getting the individual and personalised lives like the one Deb had described? And to our embarrassment, we realised that a lot of what was getting in the way was us. Now, we hadn't been frivolous in our work. We'd always been well-meaning, organised, responsible, accountable, dedicated, and even clever. Lots of people thought our services were great, and they came and they told us that. But I think people must have been easily pleased, because when we thought about it, what we saw was that we had been focused on keeping people occupied, rather than giving people the opportunity to define and direct what they wanted their supports to look like. We had gone around for years and years, like lots of people, saying that we work together with people with disabilities to help them find a good life. But really, what we had been doing was inviting people into a one-sided relationship where we had the authority and we had the control of resources. Being in partnership with individuals and families was really a measure, we realised, of how well they could fit into our systems rather than about mutual design and development. Now, we wanted to support people to have a good life, but to be perfectly honest, we're disability support workers, so we had no idea how to do that. We decided on the spot that we needed to talk to people in a new way. So we commenced an informal exploratory process of talking to interested individuals and with disabilities, their families, staff, and people external to Milparinka who were not associated with structured group programs and who were at the forefront of assisting people one person at a time. Now, we thought we'd know what to do after a few conversations, and 7 years later, we're still talking, we're still seeking answers, and we're still scratching our heads all the time. But we have learned some things that have changed us for the better. Now, a little bit about where we're up to now. At this stage, Milparinka's come part way down the path of transformation. We still have a long way to go. None of it's been easy, but we have seen some very meaningful and inspiring outcomes that have been well worth the challenges. Now, all that being said, we're not there yet. I just sometimes think that maybe we've taken a few deep breaths and a few steps forward, but we refuse to go back. Some of the things we're seeing are new and better choices. We have seen some people's lives change as they defined and described what a meaningful life meant to them and were assisted to live those choices. Most notably for us, people who've connected to new lifestyles have moved closer to their communities and further away from us. We've seen changes in staff roles. We've seen dramatic changes in staff roles from supporting or looking after people to working proactively and developmentally alongside people who are designing their own pathways. Staff are in new roles that include relationship facilitators and community capacity building. We've seen a reduction in the dependency on specialised staff and segregated supports, and a huge increase for us in the use of natural supports, where people who we know are connected to the community and are in places alongside other community members without support staff being there. We know more and more people for whom we used to be the primary support who are now more part of their communities and needing us in only smaller parts of their lives. In reality, for most of these people, we haven't been replaced by other disability supports. We've been replaced by people getting better lives. Now, a good life means everybody. Often when I talk to people, a lot of people seem to think in this transformation that we are talking about people with high levels of skills, with very good skill levels, and that's not always the case. Many of the people who we've seen make changes in their life have poor communication skills. Some have what others call problem behaviours, some have major physical disabilities, and others have a very limited range of day-to-day skills. It doesn't matter about the skill level. When we introduce people one person at a time in a way that allows them to know and be known by others, good things happen. It also isn't the case that we're always also talking about a whole life and picking up everyone all at once. For many people, it has been finding the right moments to taste life in a different way and knowing what can be achieved. David's story about a cup of coffee is one of these. David's a young man who loves his family and he's part of a very large family network. And when we spoke to David and his family about 18 months ago, we realised that one of the greatest senses of loss and disconnection in David and his family's life was David's inability to take part in family outings in public places such as coffee shops and restaurants. David would not sit still for more than 20 seconds without jumping up and causing chaos. He'd walk clumsily through the cafe, being chased by people and bumping into things and people, unable to be restrained. And at that time we spoke to David's family about spending some of his support money differently, which they did. David started going to the cafe near his home and his own with a staff member from Milparinka who worked in partnership with the cafe to find out what made the cafe a good place for David. What David liked about the cafe, and building on this, the right place for him to sit, working out the right timing between ordering drinks and bringing out what he ordered, the right conversations with the waiters to make it a better experience, and gradually increasing the amount of time that he stayed sitting and enjoying his time there. Members of his family also came in and supported the process by sitting in the cafe with David for periods of 1 to 5 minutes. Now, 3 months ago, his mother called me. She was incredibly excited to say that David's grandmother, and David went to the cafe and spent 25 minutes sitting there sharing food and time together. Now, the 25 minutes is fantastic. Mum's excitement is important, but it's really just about a moment in time that hopefully just becomes ordinary and increases his family as our expectation. However, what is absolutely great is the fact that the cafe staff, who just like many others, would have often asked David to leave the cafe, became part of the safeguarding. As the chances for them to get to know David as another person and customer increased, they spent more time and energy to get to know him and work in partnership with us and David to create an opportunity for him. What we do also know is that if David's family making a choice to use his funds differently in an individualised way, and us following that choice, they were able to achieve something worthwhile and include him in his community as an individual who people could get to know. This story would not have happened if David had have stayed in segregated groups for all of his time, being safe and looked after. Katie is a fantastic and lovely young woman. She's friendly, full of smiles, warm, and she's extremely physically disabled. Cannot move any of her limbs, spends most of her life in a moulded wheelchair, if not in a bed. Katie is fed her meals through a tube and has no formal means of communication. Katie also has major health issues and needs total care with personal needs. There's little doubt that Katie's going to need high levels of support throughout her life just to take part in the day. When we got to know Katie, we put her in a room with people just like her so that we could meet her and their needs in a sensible and efficient way. Now, how wrong were we? When we got to know Katie by spending time with her and talking to the people who loved her about who she is and what she values, we realised we hadn't put Katie in a room with people just like her at all. People just like Katie aren't people who share an extreme disability. They were young people who liked bright lights, activity, noise and banter. And when we realised this, together with Katie and her family, we found a more sensible and relevant place for Katie to be, just for a short period of the week. Each Monday, Katie, when she is not unwell, spends her mornings at Melbourne University. She goes upstairs and collects recycled writing pads and takes these downstairs where she places them on a tray and people collect them. Now, instead of being in our sensible place, she is in the hustle and bustle of young people around movement, lights, noise, jokes, greetings, banter, and at least on Mondays now, Katie is spending time with people who are just like her. A different point people often talk to us about is that life opportunities need to happen when people are young, and we also believe that's not the case. It's not age or levels of skills that make the difference. It's who people are, what they value, who they want to be with, and where they want to be. It's about being in places and with people you have things in common with you, and being there one person at a time in real relationship with people. Joe attends an Italian club, social club, 2 days a week, speaking Italian, taking part in all the activities, and not having or needing any specialised staff with him. Now, since joining the club, Joe prefers to go by his Italian name of Giuseppe. Giuseppe is also currently applying to the Victorian Blind Institute for a paid part-time job, and it looks like coming off. Graham has a part-time job in a local pub, cleaning the tables and collecting the glasses. And while there, he is surrounded by the things he loves: ochre blokes, bad language, footy talk and beer. And he's my sort of guy. People from the pub now see him as a mate and drop in and visit him. Tony, who loves flowers, is currently getting to know a local florist who is creating an opportunity for him to go and work there a few times a week, helping them sort flowers, and he won't need us there. None of these men can cross a road unassisted. None of them can cook a meal or make a sandwich. None of them can be easily understood by anyone who doesn't know them well when they speak. But when they are in the right place, at the right time, the normal relationships in the community are enough to make it work. These three men, Giuseppe, Graham and Tony, are all over the ages of 55 and have been taking part in full-time group activities in our traditional day service for a combined total of over 115 years. Yes, they will have had some nice times in those groups, but not enough to think of it as a life well spent. Too many years too late did we start to ask in detail who people were and who they wanted to be, rather than what made a nice day's worth of activities to keep them occupied. And we are desperate not to let that happen to anyone else who we know. One of the first things we did in this transformation was to look around us to see if we could find local examples in the same sorts of services as us, to grab onto other people's learnings, be mentored, take shortcuts and stuff like that, because we didn't need to recreate the wheel. Now, strikingly, we didn't find any. But what we did, that we could do this with in any sort of thorough manner, though some agencies did have aspects of what was informative. What did we find? We found that agency goals, words and stated intentions had changed for the better. Even so, we found that practices had remained largely the same, and the lives of service users hadn't changed that much at all. In effect, organisations seemed satisfied with these new symbols of a good life, but did not have much substance by way of really important changes in people's lives. What we found was a lot of sincere words and rhetoric, fantastic mission and values statements. We found coloured brochures and expressed commitments to other people's lives. We even found agency pens with mottos and occasionally rubber wrist bracelets which encapsulated a one-line solution to people's lives. We found numerous examples of organisational tinkering where people had thought that one organisational shape hadn't worked, so they created a new one. And this was again put in front of people with disabilities, and they were again asked to redesign their lives to fit into a new and supposedly better organisational shape. with new and better limitations, of course. Basically, we realised when we did this that these organisations were just like us. They hadn't gotten to a deeper level. They were also like us, getting in the way of individuals achieving good lives that made sense to them and who they were. Now, people sometimes ask me, what is it that was getting in the way? Well, there was lots of things, so I'll just mention a few here. We needed to stop coming up with solutions for people's lives before we even knew who they were or what they wanted, so that we could stop creating new boxes for people to fit into. We needed to stop putting timetables in front of people and saying, pick something that you like from this, and then calling that a choice. We needed to stop planning our policies from the top down and develop them ground up from what we learned from the people we supported. We also needed to stop confining and limiting people's dreams by planning from a starting point of how much money or how many resources were available, and plan from a basis of people's dreams and what they really wanted in their lives. One of the hardest things for us was we needed to stop getting in the way of good ideas by confronting the misconception that as service providers, we were the forward thinkers, and it was communities and families that got in the way of progress. We needed to stop meeting people and telling them we were there to provide them with a service, and instead recognise that we were there to be a tool they could use and reshape to help them get the life that they wanted. We desperately needed to stop thinking of people as collective groups and start knowing each individual one person at a time, so that we could assist them better to be able to describe and define their own support needs. More than anything, we needed to be ethical and stop rhetoric, grand statements and the occasional success stories becoming agency evidence which serve to bring about delusions of achievement rather than a sustainable capacity to support personalisation. And remembering that things like being person-centred is not about a couple of meetings a year and a written plan, but about an ongoing relationship with one person that expands, shrinks and reshapes in the context of that person's life. In response to our initial conversations and thinking, we did for us what was probably one of the most risky things. We decided to step bravely into the mystery of tomorrow and not be the ones to set the direction. We would live with the uncertainty of putting the development of our organisational shape and identity behind what people wanted, and we would find out what people wanted from life and let this design our future. But when we sat back and thought about it, about what some of the points of difference would need to be for us if we were to take this approach, we learned very quickly that our old ways of measuring success and satisfaction weren't going to be very useful anymore. While we had always said that our measures were personalised, they were really just about asking people if they were happy with our services rather than satisfied with the many elements in their own lives. We realised that any measure of personal fulfilment was intrinsic to people's lives and what was fruitfully accomplished in their lives. We were no longer interested in defining our success by bureaucratic or organisational factors, such as how many required documents we had, or because we provided 200 hours per month for support in community settings, or because we could give out the results of organisational-wide evaluations that presumed that the same things brought satisfaction to everyone we supported. A fulfilled human being is a very different thing to an efficient organisation. So consequently, our measures of progress needed to be developed deeply within the unique and evolving context of each individual's life and needs. Jackie and her life. Jackie's a great example of how a deeper attention to people's lives actually began to show us what was really important for each person, and we have lots of stories that have shown us, because that's how we decided to learn from each person. At 28 years of age, Jackie had spent most of her time not wanting to go to her segregated support group or her individualised program that they provided with specialised staff. And when she did go, she never ever came home and shared stories about with anyone about where she had been, what she had done. Jackie came to us desperate to find something better. Now, Jackie's measures of success and satisfaction changed constantly from the time we initially met her, and Jackie's measure of the relevance of our support wasn't about getting her to an activity to fill her days. Jackie wanted a life she enjoyed, not a life that kept her occupied and well supervised. Her priorities were about wanting to know someone was going to take the time to get to know her and listen to her and be faithful to her, to have things to look forward to, doing that excited and challenged her. It was about spending time in places where she felt comfortable and was around the people she wanted to be with, other adults with valued roles. As we tuned in better to Jackie and supported her hunger for life, it became about the excitement her family shared when she came home after every experience and started to tell stories about where she had been and who she had been with. And when, for the first time in 28 years, she started baking cakes alongside her mother in preparation for when people were coming around to talk about her life. Jackie and her family and we didn't know that these were going to be measures of success before they happened. But when we did, we knew something was working. Now, thankfully, they don't see these as breakthrough successes anymore, as they've become a normal part of Jackie's days. In a sense, the bigger and more relevant to her personally that her life opportunities became, the fuller were her satisfactions with her new life. Jackie's current measure is about the degree she can continue to entrench herself in a valued role as a carer at a local childcare centre, increasingly connecting to other people who share time with her in her role as a co-worker, while reducing the time she spends with disability support staff. 8 months ago, this would never have been on Jackie's radar. She and her family always expected her to be alongside a disability worker or family member. When we talk to Jackie about this, she sees her success as being independent, responsible, a friend and helpful. Her mother sees it as Jackie redefining herself as an adult, family member and not being seen as a dependent child. Jackie's measures of success grew with her and built, as in anyone else's life, on her personal growth needs and aims, not from a pre-developed program goal of the agency. In her earlier programs, prior to this more personalised focus, Jackie's success and satisfaction were measured by how often she attended segregated activities, how many hours she spent in community settings, and if the service she attended had a documented person-centred plan and she went for the cups of coffee and the bowling trips that it described. While of course we document what we do to support Jackie, Jackie herself doesn't have a formal document that she refers to. She and her family simply want ongoing conversations about life and good living, and the measures of success and satisfaction are developed in the context of that ongoing life and what she needs to or wants to happen next. They are not shared with others in a cost-effectiveness model that assumes that everyone gets the same value from going bowling or going for a cup of coffee. This of course means that we need to keep up with more people like Jackie who measure satisfaction differently. And it is tough, but it also means that the next step we take is designed in the context of each person rather than in the misleading context of a globalised average of what all service users are doing. Now, one of our dilemmas in measuring success is our government partners. They are 100% behind our transformation and what we are doing. They support intensely our personalised approach and people getting the best lives possible. But they still measure success by how many hours 100 people spend in the community each month, as if it tells them something about quality in people's lives. And we need to know that all these hours are meaningful for the person, or they're empty hours. It doesn't matter where they are spent. We understand and increasingly work differently with families now, and there's been a significant shift in our relationships over the last 5 years. From being the requesters of services, families have become partners and leaders in thinking and design. taking new paths and having new expectations of what a fulfilled life can look like. At the same time, we are very clear that we still have a lot to learn about how to play our new role well. We can see that a lot is possible, but can also see that we fall short in actually achieving the dream. But still, what has worked so far in these relationships with families? We learn to start and continue our conversations with families differently. In our new conversations, supports are not something that pre-exist and families and individuals can access, but something that they can imagine, design and negotiate. When people come to us and ask us what we can do for them, our response is nothing much. But what we can do is work in partnership with you to assist you in getting the life that you want. To continue these partnerships, we've done away with time limit or pre-planned moments in time, such as annual or biannual planning meetings to think about people's lives. We now see this thinking as happening in ongoing conversations with people about their lives. We have continued with our as we've continued with these new conversations, we've noted a much easier capacity to engage and re-engage with individuals and their families as their life issues and priorities change. Basically, bureaucratic rituals such as planning sessions have been replaced by more fluid communication processes that are uniquely designed around each family and each individual. We invest in families because self-determination and personalisation for us doesn't start with an organisation and the people sitting together and talking about how to give good things to other people. To us, it starts with the people whose lives are affected being able to think more deeply, share authority, leadership, design their own lives and use this to influence what services look like. To many families, this way of working with an agency is new, and they need the opportunity to understand that this means new roles and responsibilities for them. They don't just happen. These new roles don't just happen because we hand over words or a coloured brochure. We spend at least 50% of our training budget per year on offering families and service users the opportunities to reflect deeply and richly about their own lives. One of the ways that we do this is we get people like Michael Kendrick, who can connect people to new thoughts and examples of other people's lives, to come out and talk to small groups of people as well as individuals in their own homes. We would never get Michael or others to come out and talk to a room like this for our purposes, or to 100 people or 50. We want people to have the opportunity to be able to reflect deeply about their own lives and thoughts. So we would never have a group of more than 10 people to any of these reflections. These sessions are not about options or types of services, but about how families and service users can go about having greater authority in determining their own life directions. It's about how families and service providers can reorient their thinking to be able to pursue opportunities that support individuals to follow their own paths within their own communities, though that's not always easy or without its own challenges. Now, is that expensive? Of course it's expensive, particularly in the time it can take both the organisation and the families and individuals. It is also the single most effective method that we have been involved with, which has helped shift people's thinking. Over 90% of the families and their sons and daughters who've engaged in these processes have begun to have more authority and have measurable movement towards new lifestyles that they are redesigning and which are not based on being in segregated programs. Families tell us there are many things that have made a difference for them in our new way of working. But there are three things that most frequently come up in conversations. First, wanting to know what a different life can look like. By sharing and seeing stories about other people's lives and opportunities in detail to help them to be able to imagine better and be inspired to think about better options. Second, having conversations about getting a life that makes sense rather than simply finding a service that can provide a place. Third, they enjoy seeing their sons and daughters being welcomed to a new place in a partnership that is looking at individuals as someone we are in relationship with to find a good life, rather than thinking of them as a problem to be solved. Families tell us that they can now see us as responding to their personal differences or uniqueness. They tell us it's better because we move at the pace of the individual and family, and understand that some families need more time to think or different ways of thinking. Families appreciate that we know them much better now and talk with them in ways that make more sense to them and which fit into their lifestyles by avoiding standardised, prescribed ways of getting to know people. We work with people as individuals and work out the best way to get to know them. Families also tell us that they appreciate the new reality that Milparinka's part in supporting people to reach their potential may vary in shape, size and input, and that Milparinka is a tool that people can use and not a goal in itself. This means as a service provider we are more available in the context of people's lives rather than the context of our systems, and we are more able to assist people to make the choices they want in their lives and not make the choices for them. Families tell us they appreciate that we are more self-consciously ethical now. They tell us that they have been surrounded for years by us and others with great ideas, clever words, promised opportunities, with a minimum of these ideas and words being translated into realities that brought about measurable differences in people's lives. If we say we are going to do something, we do it. We expect to be able to show it to people, and we expect to be able to do it at an individual and organisational level. Our organisational strategic plan is an example of this. Our current plan was developed by the people that we describe as the most important decision makers in our organisation. We had a consultant with no ties to us interview individually, without us there, 25% of our service users and families to ask them what they wanted Milparinka to be and look like to them. It is these thoughts and comments that are our documented plan. No paid staff contributed to the plan because it's not about their lives. We can show people that they are important decision makers and where they can see themselves in more and more places in our organisation. Critical measures of success. As an organisation, we've come a fair way down the path of transformation. And we still have a long way to go, and it hasn't got easy yet. Because we are fallible, we need to be very conscious of establishing benchmarks and points of reference that keep us focused as an organisation. We think of these as critical measures of success, and if it doesn't fit, it doesn't happen. And that is ensured that when it gets tough, and it does get tough, that we're not going to be redirected by system pressures. And that prism, just an off-the-cuff example, costs us a fair bit of attention. We get a bit of attention from the government ministers and stuff. And last time they wanted to come out a couple of times to visit, and they want to come to the centre and take photos, and we say, no, you can't do that, because why you like us is because people are getting lives. We'd like you to come and just meet one person and talk to them about their lives. So we don't have a lot of government ministers visit anymore. Another measure, critical measure that we have is communication. We have always said in this reorientation that we wanted to listen to people. Now, about 80% of the people who we know have complex communication needs and struggle to be understood. And we believe that all people should have as much support as possible to be able to communicate, because all people are entitled to have influence and authority in their lives. All people should be able to make decisions about their own lives, make friends, solve problems, have a joke, celebrate, tell their story. When people have trouble speaking for themselves, we of course go to the people who know them well, like their families, but that is not our preference. We want to know from the person themselves. We spend a significant amount of resources to employ a full-time communication manager, sessional speech pathologists and others to assist people to be able to tell us who they are and what they want. Basically, our view is that if we or others are not spending significant energy and resources and giving people their own voices, then we or others are not serious about listening to people. We learned that taking staff along for the journey wasn't about big moments in time. great statements, policies and one-off training events. It was about continuous commitments and ethics. It was about giving staff new knowledge, resources and capacities, and then creating every opportunity possible for staff to consolidate this in their relationships with service users and families. It was replacing some of what we think of dreaded competency-based training, which comes without thinking, with some values-based training, and having continuous conversations about one person at a time instead of about systems and groups, alongside of families, in the same room at the same time, so that ideas and issues can be discussed fluidly with an appreciation of each other's realities. It was about leading from the top of the organisation and keeping up the pressure for change. We found early on, when our attention was distracted, that if we didn't lead from the top of the agency, and when we didn't keep talking and didn't stay connected to people and have the right presence in people's actual lives or model the ethics, the things that we wanted at the top of the box went to the bottom, and what came to the top was cynicism and mistrust. We know that we need to constantly show staff and everyone else that we are responding to issues about individuals within a framework of values and principles rather than a framework of systems and rules. And there can be no exceptions. The leaders in the organisations need to model the way, saying to staff and everyone else and meaning it, that the job of the CEO and the job of the most junior staff and everyone in between are exactly the same, to assist one person to get the best life possible. We just use different tools in our work. We need to be aware that just because someone gets to be in a better space than they were before, that's just part of the journey. It doesn't end there. Decisions are not forever, and we need to be vigilant in staying connected with people's lives to understand when it's time to seek more out of life. Of course, we can assist people to do this, but it is always a lot better when people realise for themselves and other people listen to them about when they need more and start to move forward in their own lives. Cancho and Josh are two young men we know who have done this over the past few years. Cancho had two jobs and recently came to us unexpectedly and absolutely terrified us by saying he was resigning his part-time job in a very well-known and popular restaurant. It had taken well over a year of effort by him, his family, and us and the restaurant to make this work. But Cancho didn't care about that. His life was fuller nowadays, and just having a job was not enough. He wanted a job that brought him more value. What he knew before anyone else was that he had outgrown the job, and his experience as a kitchen hand, while he had loved it at the start, didn't fulfil his needs anymore, as it didn't have the capacity for the banter and work relationships that he wanted. He went on to get more work in his other job. Josh has had many changes in what he has done, all of them initiated by him, with all the situations he left behind working well. Josh just knew it was time to find something better. Josh has worked for Conservation Victoria. He has been a greenskeeper at a golf course and is now in paid part-time work in an electrical company. He's an established artist who sells his work through public art galleries and has a job in a local gym helping to set up classes for which he got totally on his own. These are two stories about young men seeing their own plateau levels and moving forward. They're extra special to us because it's young blokes doing what they're supposed to do, shaping their lives, their own lives, and not asking others to do it for them. Both young men no longer have any specialised supports in any of their workplaces. They just have jobs. Josh and Cancho give us another important reminder. When we met both these young men at the same time 5 years ago, that's when we met them 5 years ago, yep. At that time, every single person in Josh and Cancho's life, all the people who knew them and loved them dearly and wanted them to get the best life possible, and all the people who were paid to look after them, and their parents, their grandparents, their brothers and sisters, uncles and aunties, families, friends, teachers, government planners believed and said out loud that they believed that these men for the rest of their lives would need to be in segregated supports, supported by specialised staff, and if they weren't with those staff, they would need to be with a family member. Now, if Josh and Cancho were here today, they would tell you themselves. So they're not here, but I get to tell you. Every single person in their life was wrong. But what was really exciting was that when those very people got the opportunity to imagine better and think deeply, it was them who came together and helped these guys get the lives that they live now. Thank you.